Okay, welcome to episode 3 of What's the Tease. My guest for this episode is the internationally renowned art star, Nasty Canasta. Welcome, Nasty Canasta, to What's the Tease.
Thank you so much. Hello.
Awesome. How are you doing today?
About the same as every other day for the past 60 days, so, you know.
So, are you still counting? Do you have an accurate number of...
No. What we did do was put up a sign on the front door that we changed so it tells us what day of the week it is, but that's about it. Because otherwise, you know.
Cool. So we're going to do a little bit of a rewind. I'm going to take you back to when you first started your career as a stage actor. Yes, studying theatre and costume design at Brown University.
Yes.
Yeah. What I'd like to know is, at that stage, when you were a student, what was your awareness of burlesque at that point?
Absolutely nothing. None at all.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think that at that point, I mean, I graduated in 98, so I think that at that point, the sort of real beginnings of the neo-burlesque movement were just starting in places like New York and LA, and at least in the US, and you know, like just a little bit of performance art, drag, some striptease and that sort of thing. So I think it was minimal to begin with, and then it certainly didn't get out to us in Rhode Island, you know, as much as we were in New York a lot seeing theater, and we just kind of didn't interact with it at all.
So then, how did you come across burlesque?
So I, right after college, I moved to New York to be a stage actor, and did a lot of, you know, there was still a downtown theater scene then, which there very much is not anymore, but I also had some friends from college who also moved to New York who were doing, you know, I was just doing basically straight plays, and I had some friends who were doing puppetry and movement-based theater and all sorts of performance art kind of things. And one friend in particular who was a puppeteer and did some circus work and stuff, and he was very adventurous, and he was the one who would, you know, 3 nights a week be like, I found this show, we have to go see. I found this poetry reading, we have to go see. I found this thing, we have to go see. And I saw more random amazing stuff with him, but he said, I guess he had taken a circus class, and somebody that did the class with him was doing part of their act at this venue that had this show. He was like, yeah, I don't know, it's a cabaret thing or a vaudeville, whatever, let's go check it out.
Yeah.
And we went, and that show, it was basically a burlesque show, and it was people who were my, you know, sort of biggest inspirations to start, like Julie Atlas Muse and Miss Tickle, and Harvest Moon, I think, was in that show. Wow. And I mean, it was like, looking back now, I'm like, what a fucking lineup. I'm sorry, I said a lot.
No,
but it was,
but it's true, Julia.
It was amazing. And I apparently watched the show like with my mouth hanging open, and when it was over, he looked at me and he was like, so when are you going to try this? And I was like, oh, you know, not like I could never do it like that, but he was just like, it was one of those, like, I don't know how you'd ever get started doing it, because there weren't classes, and there weren't, you know, I think there was that show and one other one in Brooklyn, so way like as far away as you could get from the Lower East Side, kind of energetically at that point in time, and you know, but it was just amazing, and I was really angry that I had just done an Ivy League theater degree, and they didn't mention that this is a thing. Like, I was so mad.
I want my money back.
Exactly.
I need a discount at the very least.
I still do want my money back, but that's another story. But you know, so it was a very, like, I was like, what the hell is this? But it was pretty cool.
Yeah. Wow. So that for me is actually very interesting to hear that at some point in New York, the shows were so sparse.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, absolutely. Because, I mean, and now, not right now, but, you know, up to a couple months ago, I mean, literally, like, there was a show in every damn bar and every, you know. But, yeah, no, at that point there was the one venue in the Lower East Side, and then one in Brooklyn did Monday Night Burlesque, and it was basically 3 performers doing 3 acts each because there weren't enough performers to have larger shows.
Yeah.
Also, it was really hard to get to that venue. There's no subway over there, so it was a real pain in the ass. But
What? Where is this place that the subway does not go to?
Williamsburg. Now it's like the hipsteriest hipster ever.
Yes.
But there was, oh man, I worked at that venue for years, and it was a 25 minute walk through an industrial neighborhood from the nearest subway. And in the winter, oh man, it was just like you'd have to sort of skate there on a sheet of ice because the sidewalks weren't well traveled. So,
Yes.
and you're in half drag, carrying a giant gig bag, falling on your ass on the way. It was amazing. It was actually pretty amazing, I have to say. They are long gone, sadly, but it was a great venue.
Good times looking back.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Upon finding burlesque, you as a performer are also a writer and a costumer. Mm-hmm. And one of the quotes that you have on your pages is a dollar store showgirl.
Yes.
So I'm like, is this partly a description of your style of burlesque, or like, what does how does that play into?
So it's sort of, it started out as a joke, but it's sort of become a little bit of a political movement for me, I want to say. So I grew up, with not a lot of money, and I was raised by my grandmother for a long time, and my family is not really, I'm sort of the only visual and performing artist, but my grandmother especially was very much the like, well, we don't have money to get a toy lightsaber, so let's figure out how to make one. So, I had lightsabers made out of paper towel tubes, and we made a dollhouse out of, spools of thread and little tiny rugs that she made out of pot holders and all sorts of stuff. So my whole life has been very much like, partially I didn't have the money for that kind of stuff, but also it was just really fun to make. I was also an only child, and I was raised by an older person, so I was alone a lot, but so the two of us would just make stuff. So when I first started performing burlesque, it was still very, especially where I was in New York, it was still very mostly coming out of drag and performance art, and so it was very DIY, downtown, gritty, and also just a lot of like, whatever the fuck you want to put on stage, put it on stage.
Yeah.
So it wasn't yet the era of the $9,000 rhinestone corset.
Really?
Yeah. I remember numbers that people just, made cardboard props, and some of the stuff was actually really beautiful, and some of it was a cardboard prop, and even the first few beehives that I went to, there were still people with their cardboard props and their whatever, and I feel very strongly that I think we've possibly lost a little bit of the art for the economics of it. I also, as after now 16 years of this, I don't think I've made as much money as I've put into my props and costumes, which is, it's tough, especially living somewhere as I did for 25 years, or so for 15 and a half of those years of doing burlesque, where my rent was $3,000 a month.
Wow.
And making $40 on gigs that it then costs you $30 to get home for. Like, it's a tough economy, and I'm so part of the dollar store. Also, New York and Brooklyn especially have amazing dollar stores.
Yes.
That are very, we don't have the chain ones, so it's like all sorts of random crap, and most of it is fluorescent and religious, and with God knows what the weird badly translated stuff on the box. So it's wonderful. So for me, the idea of making your physical props out of these sort of more found materials and less expensive materials, I think it means that you don't every costume doesn't immediately look the same. I think that sometimes there is a little bit of sameness to, fancy sequin gown, fancy crystal corset, giant fancy fans. and what people do with that is what makes the act, the
Yes.
stage presence and the choreography and the personality of the performer. I also just want to challenge the idea that, the acts and performers that are of value to the art form, whether that's, as title winners or as headliners or whatever, are only the ones who have this economic basis to put, thousands of dollars into a costume. I've seen performers
Yes.
do.
'Cause it's like,
I use this example all the time. Darlinda, who's one of my favorite performers.
yes.
One of my favorite acts of hers, and I don't know if she still does it, but years ago she did an act where she sat on a stool and wrapped herself in a piece of red fabric,
the red
right?
fabric. That is my favorite Darlinda act.
And it's literally a piece of fabric,
Yeah.
and it's spellbinding.
Yes.
It's just amazing. And
Yes.
she also does, she has some amazing giant costumes and some, and that's not to say that there isn't artistic value to that, but I think we get very much in this mindset of you have to start with that. And when I teach new performers and new costumers that, I really sort of want to stress, because it just seems overwhelming. Like, well, I don't have the disposable income to put this money into a thing and then spend thousands of dollars to go to a festival, and that, like, what if all I can do is use the things in my house? And and I think that enforces creativity a lot of times in a way that's absolutely beautiful. And then I also love kitsch and, just crap on Italians. So we like shiny things. So, we like fake flowers. That's all I can say about that. So.
You're also known as the pod mother of Nerdlesque. And you were talking about making lightsabers with your grandmother. And of course, being an only child, so you can imagine, that's just imagination central. It makes me understand a lot more about you.
Right? It really
it's like
does.
all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together, knowing this little bit of information. I'm like, right. What are some of the characteristics that you would say define Nerdlesque?
This has been a wonderful ongoing discussion for now almost over a decade, and I'm glad that it's still a thing and not just one of those like, that came and went.
Yes.
I have a very broad definition, because I don't know, just to be a jerk. It is burlesque or striptease, or however you define burlesque for yourself, which we could talk about that for a million years. That takes its inspiration from some aspect of pop culture, or history, or science. I would consider, I have seen some acts, Nerdlesque acts that literally are based on just actual science. I've seen some wonderful ones based on, she is now retired from burlesque, but Liberty Rose used to do an act as Ben Franklin, as Benjamin Franklin. I mean, it was just, actually doing science in the act too, which is kind of wonderful. So, I think that for many people, or for the sort of like, general, is there a textbook? The textbook definition is, that it's based on pop culture characters. And I think that actually is just a small part of it. I honestly would think that it's anything with a reference, really. I think a lot of, so have been incredibly fortunate to work with the producers of the New York Nerdlesque Festival. For the last few years, I've actually been part of the adjudication committee, and so I get to watch all of the submissions, which is amazing and wonderful. And we get a lot of submissions that are based on fairy tales. I don't. Little Red Riding Hood isn't a nerd movie, but it is a reference. It's a cultural reference. So I think that's, to me, it's something that is inspired by something. That's the worst definition ever. But and for me, because I've been doing so much Nerdlesque for so long, my own personal stuff has been more lately less specific characters created by other artists, and more generalized, space character, villain, hero kind of thing, just for myself. So I'm seeing, and I'm seeing more of that happen too, which is kind of my favorite thing about it too. That people are now, rather than doing what I very lovingly refer to as fan fiction nerdlesque, they're now doing their own fiction.
Yes, yes. Do you think that it's important and necessary to differentiate between the various expressions of burlesque? So classic, nerdlesque, whateverlesque, boylesque.
I think it can help to definitely to sell a show to an audience that, let's face it, I mean, I think we think that because this is what we do and eat and sleep and breathe and sweat and poop 24 hours a day, we think that the entire world knows as much about all of this as we do. And honestly, I think the average person walking by on the street, like, maybe knows who Dita Von Teese is. Like, that's it, you know? And I honestly don't think that it is as ubiquitous as we assume, especially outside of, you know, the many of the cities that we perform in too. So I think to sell a show of, wait, what is this that I'm going to see, to an audience that isn't all up in its business, it sometimes helps. But I think that also within our own stuff, it can limit our, look, I gotta say, the number of times that I've been backstage at, you know, shows that are more, they have to, by the nature of the venue and the audience are more, you know, classic or traditional or whatever, with a room full of people who, you know who I am, how was that festival? Well, it was really good and there was some good stuff, but then they like stopped and did this like nerd thing for like 6 acts in the middle, and I'm like, you know, just it's not all one or the other thing, and not every show needs artistically to have everything in it. But like, could you imagine if and then they stopped and did some like boy thing in the middle, and there were all these like male presenting performers. Ugh, I don't even understand. Like, really? I don't want these distinctions to limit it in the same way that we had this whole discussion, like, well, boylesque is boylesque burlesque. I'm like, I don't know, it's a human doing burlesque. So at a point, like, if your focus is, it is a showcase of boylesque, it's a showcase, it's a festival of boylesque, then call it that. But otherwise, like, just have humans in the show. You know. Yeah. So I think outside of our own little bubble, it is useful.
I understand why it needs to be differentiated for the sake of the education of the audience. Also because, exactly, if you're existing outside of this bubble of burlesque, as you so eloquently put it, maybe somebody's got a predisposed idea of what it is they're looking for and that what they want to see. So I suppose like enlightening them in one way. But then I kind of wonder, within the bubble, by differentiating it sometimes, does that maybe cause like some kind of separation, you know?
Exactly. And I think that I think that in some cases and with some individuals and in some circumstances, there is still a little bit of a idea that, you know, classic burlesque is real burlesque. Boylesque is, you know, allowed to exist within it. And nerdlesque or pop culture burlesque or reference-based burlesque is, you know, people dressing up like Wonder Woman, whatever. And you know, and I gotta say, like, again, it's having watched every minute of every one of the nerdlesque festivals, I have seen acts at that show that have, in a wonderful way, been devastating and moved me to tears. And, you know, and I've sat through large shows or festivals of classic burlesque where, you know, it's been very pretty. And also I've seen classic numbers move me to, like, you know, emotions, and I've seen plenty of nerdlesque. You're like, yep, that was fun. You know, so I think my point is that it can all exist. You know, there isn't a hierarchy. There isn't a one is real and one is not, because, like, sorry, we're not dealing with like a 4,000-year-old art form here. Like, you know, what is real burlesque? Like, it's a thing that people sort of started doing, you know, argued 40s, 30s, whatever. But really, like, it ain't that old. So who's to say? I have acts that you wouldn't know they were nerdlesque if the host didn't say this is based on a scene in the movie 2001. Like,
Yeah.
there that
Like
it's
you
just
just did
that
it.
for me. Exactly. I
Yeah.
used to do a fan dance to
The
some
car
of the
alarm.
music from, well, that one, I don't know, that's just, I don't even know what you call that, but I used to do a fan dance to the music from Star Wars, and it was just a, it was a black fan dance, and there was one glove because sort of I was Darth Vader. But like
Yeah.
nobody, if it would literally be like 3 minutes into it, and a couple people would be like, "Oh, I recognize this music," but
Yeah.
like, is that nerdlesque? If you don't know it's nerdlesque, is it? Then doesn't.
Yeah.
And there were fucking rhinestones on that costume, so
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, so it's an interesting idea, and I think like it can be an academic discussion, and it can be an art, a sort of interesting artistic discussion, but I don't necessarily want to see it limit us outside of. I would like to do a festival that showcases nerdlesque,
Yeah.
draglesque, classic, burlesque, whatever. Yeah, that's all. And I think the
Yeah.
artificial hierarchy is bullshit.
Yes, totally agree. You have a really fantastic online presence,
Oh,
and
that's so weird. Thank you. I feel like
Yeah.
I just kind of, put up pictures of my butt and hope for the best. But there you go.
so if you don't follow Nasty Canasta already, Instagram at Nasty Canasta NYC, and you're gonna find those awesome pictures of her butt.
It's a lot of butt. It's butt centric. It is.
But it's also one of my favorite segments is the hashtag Two Cheeks Tuesday. So
Yeah.
I want to know, like, have you always been a culinary enthusiast?
No, I have not, and I don't necessarily consider that I am. It's funny because honestly, so every Two Cheeks Tuesday isn't just recipes, but the first time I did one, I was like, oh, it's okay. But the recipes have to be rather simple, actually,
Yes.
in order to put them between my butt cheeks.
Simply delicious.
Some of them are really good, actually. So, and then a lot of times I'm just like, oh, it's Tuesday. Crap. What am I making for dinner? Okay. So yeah, no, I'm not a huge. I mean, I like to cook, but I'm not particularly good at it. So I think maybe it all looks better with your butt, maybe.
Also, that is one talented. Like some people have very skilled feet. With able to like pick up and juggle and stuff with their feet.
Yes, exactly.
I figure you could do that with your two cheeks.
We call it the prehensile ass in our house.
Uh-huh.
I actually have a number where I make a martini with my butt, which I have not done in a while. So I should pull that one out one of these days.
That's a good one to look at. A little while ago, you had said that you were, I think it was probably around the time when you moved, and then you were saying that you were going to do away with some of your acts.
Yes. Yeah, I've had to. Just for space.
Just like you mentioning now that, you should probably look at your martini act again. I'm like, okay, so you still have all those things. That's amazing.
Oh no, I have a lot of them. Although I'm in my work/storage room right now, and there's a whole big bag of stuff that's sort of meant to leave my life, but there's nowhere for it to leave to at the moment. So now the longer it sits there, the more you're like, I should just keep it. And like, I've been walking around this bag for months. I know we're all hoarders, right? Yeah, have to be. Oh.
But I mean, how does one go about that process of discarding? Discarding sounds so like harsh.
No, but
letting go of, or however it is, like just separating yourself from those acts that you thought about.
Really hard because I also I have a short attention span, and I was doing for a long time. I was doing a 3 times a week floor show before the venue just went to hell. And so those were acts that I still like those to be, some comedy and some, whatever. But it was not a nerdlesque venue. It was not, I mean, that was a venue that people did not know why they were there. So you had to sort of tailor it. So, but like I did that show for about 6 or 7 years before it went to hell. So, that one, I had a lot of acts that I made just for that. But, so I'm finding that the emotional, there's the sort of practical component of literally looking at my spreadsheet, because I totally have one for what acts I've done at what shows, and looking and being like, I have not touched this act in 5 years. The opportunity to perform it doesn't it's either so specific, or such a, such a mess, or it's a holiday act. And, holiday acts are tough because if you miss Easter, then that year, then there's another year that just sits in the closet or whatever. So if it's something that I haven't touched, it's the same thing I do when I try to, when they say when you clean out clothing, your day wear too. If you haven't touched it in a whole year's worth of seasons, then let it go. So that, but
the
then
Marie
there's
Kondo.
Yes, exactly. But then there's sort of an emotional component too, that I had some acts that were, created for shows that turned out to be not very pleasant experiences, or the last times I performed them were not very happy experiences. So it was a little easier to let those go, and actually more fun to kind of like cut up the costume and, save the zipper and throw the rest of it out. And then some stuff that I can't really do floor work anymore. I have arthritic knees. I have bad hips. So it's stuff that was 75% floor work that I couldn't re-choreograph, that they had to go,
And then what do you say to fans when they're like, "Oh my God, nasty! No, I don't know what I'd do if I don't see said act again."
Maybe there's video of it. Maybe I don't. I will say I did retire. So I did an act years ago that was based on it was a sort of tribute to the history of Coney Island in Brooklyn, and then that act went through a couple different iterations, and then I retired it and donated the costume to the museum there. And then Melody Sweets in Las Vegas did a Coney Island themed act, and she was like, "Will you come to Vegas and do your act in this show?" And I was like, "I will rebuild the costume for you." Yes. Absolutely. So and it actually came out a lot better. And it's funny because part of the costume, there had been a painting by my ex-husband. So I was like, I don't even want to have that anymore anyway. So it was nice to redo it and not have that component to it. And then that one kicked around, and I did it a bit more for a while, and then I realized that was an act that outside of that specific show kind of only played in Brooklyn. So
okay,
I retired it again because there was sort of no point in keeping an act that I couldn't travel with, and so it's interesting. It's been over 16 years. You make up and throw out a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah. You posted on a Two Cheeks Tuesday when you were retiring some of these acts. You had the baby bottle.
Yes.
Can't remember what the name of that particular act is.
I always called it Stripper Mom.
That was the first act that I ever saw you perform in. Is that act really retired?
It is, because that one were for two very specific reasons. One being that I actually can't handle the floor work anymore. Okay. And it was done to an R. Kelly song, to Pregnant by R. Kelly. When R. Kelly just literally proved, as we all suspected, that he was one of the worst human beings on the face of the earth, it didn't seem appropriate to perform to that song anymore. I went through about 3 different other songs trying to replace it, and I was never really super satisfied with any of the other songs. And
that's fair enough.
So it seemed like the combination of sort of not really being able to handle it anymore anyway, or not feeling like I was performing it the way that I wanted to physically, and then the music issue. I was just like, you know what, it's fine, it's time to go. And I still have I still have the video with that song up, and I don't know how I feel about that. It's
yes. But at the same time,
but at that point, you could put a disclaimer on and whatever. But
it was a moment in time.
Exactly.
When this art, when that act was created, and it lived for that period. And I understand, moving forward, knowing what we know now, sort of whatever you want to do with it, of course, is up to you. But I was glad to see it then. It was also just it's hilarious that the moral choice, acknowledgement of the moral choice of the song, and awareness of that, and then the moral ambiguity of the actual act.
The act itself. So I love it.
How they live together.
Do that act in a strip club. And I was worried going in. It was sort of a early in the evening show, so a lot of the club dancers were there and saw the show. And I was like, is this inappropriate? Like, are they gonna? Is the perception gonna be that I'm making fun of people? And at least the people who spoke, the dancers who spoke to me after were like, I'm gonna ask if I can bring my kid. I want to bring my kid in. That's amazing. So I was like, all right, that actually, and I also had a friend who, when I first did the act, had just had twins, and she was like, if you want one of the babies for the act. And I was like, I don't trust myself, but thank you very much that you
wow,
that you're
offering
into
up
that.
offering up live children.
To be fair, she was the one person who, when we did Naked Girls reading shows in New York, she had to leave a show at intermission because she was so pregnant that she thought she might actually give birth that night. And she was reading naked. So the girls have been on stage, before birth, so that was kind of awesome.
Respect. You've just recently co-produced the Quarantine Burlesque Festival.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
which was
So
really fun.
we watched it. It was so awesome. I felt so lifted. I mean,
Good.
after that,
that was the point, I think. Yeah.
for anybody who missed it, is it something that you're looking at possibly putting online again?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think we might submit. I know the Burlesque Hall of Fame is doing an archive of things that people are creating. They're asking people to submit digital work that they're creating during this. So
wow.
once we
Okay.
check in with the everybody who's been who was part of the festival and make sure that they're all okay with it. I don't know if this stuff will then be accessible through Behoff or not, or if it's just going to be an archive. But
Yeah.
but I think that's kind of it. We wanted it to be. So part of the hard thing was, we did this very underground art form that like you had to be there to see. And we were very much like, we're not going to post. I mean, video technology, in 2005 was crap anyway. And internets wasn't really like it is now. So, there was sort of no way to put. It was very much a live experience, right? But now I'm like, oh, yeah, we put hours and hours and hours of rehearsal and props and time and into that performance, and those 200 people saw it, and that was great. But so I like the idea that we're creating things that are more enduring now, but at the same time we did want a festival that was a limited experience, a limited time experience. So
Yeah, I support that. And as a producer, what are the new challenges that you came across with producing something remotely?
that's
Like, is
interesting.
there anything that kind of stands out to
That's
you?
an interesting
Like, of course,
question.
different from producing
Right.
a show as you would.
I think as much as the fight for years was getting people's music and stuff in on time and their act information, people eventually would send in their song, or if they didn't, they'd bring an iPod to the venue, and it'd be what it was. But I think that's sort of the biggest challenge, is getting the stuff in a usable format in time to then edit it yourself. But there is also that element of like, well, you didn't send it in time, so you're cut. Like, what can I do? Like, I can't travel across the world and extract a video from you. So right now, trying to promote anything where we're all just overwhelmed by information and social media, and that's always been a challenge. But I think it's a slightly different challenge right now, and I think it occurred to me the other day. It's interesting. I'm enjoying now recording and my own pieces for other people's shows, or just for the hell of it. But I don't think I'm gonna do any more. I don't foresee at the moment doing any more full shows, creating any more full shows.
Okay.
It's not that we're getting too many of them, but now there are so many of them. And somebody pointed out the other day, like, oh yeah, our show is going live on Friday, and it's going to be hard because there's a lot of other really good shows. There's like 3 or 4 other amazing ones going up at the same time. And it's interesting because you used to have the idea of like, oh, right, we're in New York, like, don't do a show the same day as that show because that'll really split our audience. Don't do a show the same day as the New York Burlesque Festival because obviously people will go to that. Now I'm like, don't do a show the same day that somebody on the other side of the world is doing a show, because that's a really weird idea now. Like,
That is.
that you can have those time conflicts geographically now. That's a weird idea to me. So but again, hopefully people recognize that things are, if they're not going out live, then you can watch it tomorrow, which is kind of nice,
Yes. And speaking about that, you've done you've created various forms of art and storytelling that you've had on the on-demand platform on Vimeo for some time now. And if correct me if I'm wrong, but you started doing that even pre Corona, COVID.
Well,
vibes.
the only video that I had, the only show that I had a whole video of was my one of the last basically the last scripted show I did last July, The Godmother.
Mafia, The Godmother, yeah.
And we actually had a great, like, because it was a last show and because it was a very sort of dear to my heart, I had somebody film it, and the video was great. And I sort of talked to everybody in the cast, and I was like, look, we have a whole show, like, curtains open, the show happens, curtains close, it's over. Why don't we put that up for a little bit? And I actually, the Fire and Fury folks let me use their on-demand account to see how that worked. And
Okay.
and that, you know, I that one was nice just because there were a lot of people who literally didn't get to see the show because it was one night only.
Yes.
So that was fun. Or people who were like, I didn't live in Brooklyn, so
Yeah.
So it's something that I know I talked about with the folks that I co-produced with for years, about like, how do we do this? And I think for a long time the technology wasn't there.
Yes.
And then there was also that idea of like, but what if, but like then we're giving it away, or it's a live art form. And now I'm like, well, clearly this is all changed. Like we kind of all have to accept, not everybody wants to do burlesque online, and that's totally fine.
Yes.
But for those who are comfortable with it, or creating work specifically for video and for online, it is a great opportunity with its own set of, you know, now I'm like, every corner of my damn apartment has been filmed in. I'm like, it's getting boring now. So
Need a new location. Okay, honey, we got to move again.
That's it. I'm going to go downstairs and like put, you know, spray paint over the security cameras and film in the building laundry room or something. Cause I'm like, this is, I can't move this couch anymore. Like, it's driving me nuts. I envy people with yards. Like, oh God.
Oh, don't you just, hey? Yeah, we also don't have one of those. Do you believe that this online platform is viable for the moment?
It's hard to say. Definitely for the moment. And I think if nothing else, if artists whose inclination is to create and perform are able to you know, satisfy themselves emotionally and artistically by creating things on film, then the opportunity, the fact that we have the opportunity to share that with the world, even at a distance, you know, I have seen personally in my own, you know, just having done other people's online shows and then the couple of my own, just as we've progressed, the numbers are down. I think part of that is that there are now more shows to watch. The numbers of viewers and and you know and the tip income and that sort of thing has gone down. I think part of it is because you know, people have there are more to choose from. You know, more shows to choose from. Part of it is that I think we're all sort of, the zeitgeist is going through these ebbs and flows where like people are like, I want to see my friends even if that's online. I want to see live shows even if that's online. I want to lean out the window and yell at people, talk about people, and then we sort of collectively go into this like, I'm just going to sit here and rewatch the Marvel movies again. I can't.
Yeah.
You know, and then that'll shift back and forth, and you know, and as we sort of open up a little bit more, you know, I don't quite know what that's going to do. Obviously, it's summer here, so that's, you know, I think people will be spending a little more time outside, and as we're able to, and maybe not watching as much stuff, whether it's, you know, Instagram titty shows or Netflix or whatever. But I also, you know, so I don't think it's not gonna pay anyone's rent. If nothing else, I mean, I'd say strip into the void. Like, you know, if it makes your heart glad to create something and put it out there, then do it. It's almost like painting a painting for the sake of just painting a painting. Like, that's great. I don't think it's going to replace live performance because it is so energetically different, and also just because I don't think internet is going to replace any form of live performance. Yes. You know, I know there's musicians and there's actors and there's, you know, whatever, creating online content right now that it's filling a little bit of a void, but obviously part of the reason that we do perform live is that interaction, which, you know, is such an important part of it.
Yeah, that very tangible exchange of energy, and in a room.
But right now, something is better than nothing. So
exactly, So Nasty, in closing, would you just like to tell me how are ways that we can support you online as an artist? What have you got coming up that we can look forward to? I know you got your merch store with producing your Brooklyn boas.
This is true, and those are very fun to make, and they give me something to do with my hands while I am rewatching the Marvel movies. So, yeah, I'd say, I'm at nastycanasta.com, and that's sort of everything that I do and make, and links to the merch stuff. I'm gonna explore putting some of my own some of the film pieces that I've made, putting those up through my store. I don't have the energy for Patreon or any of that on it personally, but I think maybe I'm just gonna make my own little iTunes store for myself, my ButtTunes store or whatever, and we'll try that. Okay, so the thing that I've really realized I love is saving those Friday night shows and watching them on Saturday morning with a cup of coffee.
Yes.
I really enjoy that. Yes. So you could also do that. Quarantine rules. You can watch titty shows at 9:00 on a Saturday morning if you want.
That's actually been my partner, Baby Ray, and I's. One of our routine things is enjoying burlesque on a Saturday and Sunday morning.
Right? It's somehow, it's delightful. I love it. I get up, I walk the dog, I come home, I put on pajama pants, and I'm like, let's see what butts I can look at this morning. It's like Saturday morning cartoons for adults. It's great.
Cool. So I'd like to say thank you to my guest today, Nasty Canasta, for joining me on What's the Tease.
Thank you.
Nasty, we tuned into everything you do, so just keep it coming. Strip into the void, sister.
I will.